Hello and welcome to week 9 of the Brit Iron Fantasy Show. I'm your host James, and with me today are Matt and Sam. Now, before we jump into the main part of this fantasy episode, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the UKTouchdown.com. It's a great source of signed memorabilia in the UK, signed NFL and college memorabilia, I should add, in the UK, which is fully legit, fully certified, at some really great prices. And also on the UKTouchdown.com, you'll also find some great articles written by Ian, the guy who runs the site, around the stories that are happening in the NFL. So go check out the UKTouchdown.com. But right, let's get into the bulk of the episode. And my guy this week, Matt, what happened in week 8?
I think this was all round one of our better weeks for my guy. There was 2 top 10 picks. All 3 of the picks would have been at sort of with an RB1 or RB2 at their position within the top 24. So maybe we're getting a bit better at this. But maybe 2 of us more than someone else. So Sam, Mo Ali Cox, tight end 20 on the week. Just didn't really seem to get that upside we were looking for. Yeah, it's a tough break for you on that one. I love the pick coming into the week, but just didn't materialise some way. Sometimes that's just how it goes. So then it's down to me and James, both top 10 picks. Brandon Ayuk against Justin Herbert. Ayuk as the wide receiver 7, so a great pick, but not quite good enough to beat Herbert as the QB 4. It's low-hanging fruit season. It's finally coming good. It was worth the bad reaction and just I think the mutual hatred for both of you last week. But I'll lock that one in. But it brings the scores from where we started the week. Sam on 2, me on 0, James on -1. Sam is now down to 1. I've jumped up to 1, so that's flipped in a week. Tied for first now, and James sits nice and consistent at his -1. Maybe this week's the week he gets
edging closer.
But jumping into our picks for this week, as always, it is looking at best scores on the season. Cannot be in the top 12 of their position, so QB1, RB1, something like that. Sam, how are you redeeming yourself this week? Who is your my guy this week?
So, my guy this week is a guy that I think you guys are going to get a little bit angry at me for because he is right on the verge of that kind of RB1 spot, I believe. I'm double checking this now because it's still getting me, but it is coming up saying, and I'm going to take Todd Gurley. He's sat just outside at the running back 13. I think he's got a really favourable matchup against the Broncos. I think it's a Broncos team that could really throw some silly interceptions and give some good field position. So I'm very confident that they can find themselves kind of in that red zone where he will get the carries. And he's found the end zone this season, sometimes much to the disappointment of Atlanta, but he has found the end zone this season. He's kind of getting back to some of that consistency that we saw a bit earlier in his career. So I like him to be a top 12 running back this week.
I like that. Hunting that touchdown upside again. I like that pick. Definitely could be fruitful for you there. James, who's getting you back to? Who's getting you out of the negative here?
Well, I'm also going along the sort of the low-hanging fruit line this week. Probably the first time I've done it this season, so it's probably going to backfire me massively. But I'm also going to stick in the running back room, and my guy for this week is David Johnson of the Houston Texans. Currently sits at RB18.
I was considering him.
There's a lot of value there. RB18 in half-point PPR on the season so far. So a little bit lower than I thought it was going to be. I thought it'd be at least top 12. But, RB18, which means I'm free to pick him up. And he's going in to Jacksonville this week, fresh off a bye. Houston had a bye last week, so he's going to be fresh legs. And going in to play this Jacksonville defense, who are the 5th worst against the run, averaging 142 rushing yards per game allowed on average this season. So it's not good for them. But they're only 14th when looking at rushing attempts against them at 175. So there's a lot of value in sort of yards per attempt here, is what I'm seeing. Yeah. And it's something I think David Johnson can really take advantage of. They've allowed 10 rushing touchdowns, and that equates to 1 touchdown about every 17 attempts, which is something that David Johnson has done 2 or 3 times this season. He's got into those numbers. One of those was against the Jacksonville Jaguars last time out in week 5. And in that game, he also had his second highest game of the season for yards per attempt at 5.65. So if we're going to go on history, I'm backing it to sort of repeat itself here. Getting maybe a bit more involved in the passing game. but also get that touchdown upside from him this week, which I think is where the value is going to come here, because he's got a very solid floor, but with that touchdown upside, he's got a very high ceiling. So yeah, David Johnson this week is my guy.
I think it's really interesting you say that, because as someone who's owned David Johnson in leagues for over the last 4 years, it has felt since the last time, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago, when he was like the RB1 and when he was last really productive. Since then, it's felt like his biggest issue. He always seems to be able to find the end zone and grind out. He always finds him spot in that 18 to 12 spot, but it seems like he's just really inefficient on his carries and he doesn't get that many yards. So the fact that he is going up against a team that kind of allows a lot of yards per carry to the running back, it'll be really interesting to see if he can kind of convert that into more yardage, whereas a lot of where he gets his points is actually from the receiving game and from touchdowns.
I think,
Precisely.
If he's going to roll back the clock, this is the week to look for it. But I like the theme you've both gone with there, the old school running backs. If this was maybe 3-4 years ago, we'd be like, that's beyond low-hanging fruit. You've just broken the rules entirely. But I'm proud of us as well. Lamar Jackson's floating around as a QB 14, I believe, on the season. No one's picked him up. McCaffrey wasn't picked up, although that was a bit of a gentleman's agreement that if you do that, that's just, you're out. I'm keeping it going on the running backs. We've got 3 running backs, so very competitive potentially. I'm going Chase Edmonds this week for the Cardinals, going up against the Dolphins. RB28, but obviously that's with Drake sitting ahead of him the whole year. It's kind of known, I think he's one of the more solid handcuffs in the league. If Drake misses time, he's got that instant RB1 potential in an explosive, exciting to watch offense. But it's not a lock this week, because Drake, he is questionable, so he could be out there. But I think even if he is, if you've got Drake at around 70-75%, they're going to give more of this to Edmonds. And there's been points this season where both 100% Edmonds has outscored him and outshone him. So I think there's more to this as well than just this week. You've got Drake, I don't know, not brilliant all year. No long-term commitment in place on either guy. This could start to swing, so you could have a really motivated Edmonds who already gets more of the receiving work. He wants to put his name in there and become more of just a 3-down guy that's just out there, jack of all trades for them. And I'm looking at him to really start that this week and stake a claim for that job permanently.
Love that.
Put me in the lead of this competition.
I like it. I like it a lot. What I also like is the fact we've all gone for 3 players in the same position. That can make it a bit more tasty this week. Because sometimes hard to compare wide receivers to running backs and stuff like that. So this makes it quite exciting, I think, going into week 9 here. But Matt, I think we may have some start-sit questions. Is that correct for this week?
We do indeed. We've got a couple interesting ones. A few just straight up, just one guy. All the ones last week where I've got all these players. Who do I start? The bulk of these this week are just 2 big names. I'll let all jump into them. But Sam, give us your first one. What's your start-sit?
So the one that caught my eye, which I was quite interested in, that this comes from George Anders over on the Instagram. So thanks for getting in touch and giving us this one, George. He wants to know kind of where we stand, what we think about Josh Allen. Obviously, the Bills going in to play the Seahawks. He's basically asking, can he be comfortable starting Josh Allen? So, I mean, James, you comfortable starting Josh Allen or?
First of all, this is a hat trick for George. I think it is now 3 weeks in a row, getting a decent question in. So great to see.
Keep him coming.
Match will be on the way to you, mate. But I think this one is quite easy for me. If you've watched sort of the previous episodes, in my guy in particular, I've picked receivers that play against Seattle. Now, that is because Seattle's pass defense is the worst in the league, averaging 358 yards against them on average per game this season, which is downright horrendous in my opinion. So to be able to pick a quarterback here that's going up against him, especially with those receiving options that he's got there, in Diggs and John Brown and Cole Beasley as well, look great this season. I think he's just going to eat up the yards, Josh Allen, on Sunday. So I would definitely be starting him.
Yeah, I think I'm on board with that as well. It's hard not to start someone like Josh Allen unless you've got another sort of QB1 option or just one of the more old school, maybe experienced, just sufficient quarterbacks in a good matchup. But this is Josh Allen. He's got the good matchup. He's got that Russian baseline, which is something I'd love to look for in fantasy. And you'd hope he's going to be able to stretch the field out, get some of those air yards going, get a bit of his swagger back, get back to what we saw at the start of the season. So I think I'm definitely putting him out there. But if it's not a great performance this week, If you ask me this next week and moving forward, I'm going to start to have to think about it more because that's going to be racking up a few average performances. So I think for those out there who have Josh Allen, really depends on who else you got. But for this week, I'm putting him in unless it's an elite quarterback on your roster. So one of those top 5 guys on the year.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. You can't not start Josh Allen against this Seahawks for all the reasons that James every single week just kind of hammers down about how bad this Seahawks pass defense is, and because he's got that rushing baseline, he's always a threat to score a touchdown. You have to start him, but, and there is a big but, the last couple of weeks, this Bills offense don't seem to be able to get moving, so that does really worry me. So I do understand the kind of confusion here of, am I starting to worry about him?
Yeah, I think it's a case of don't be that guy that sort of bails too soon on it and overreacts and panics. I think for me, it's got to be maybe 4 or 5 weeks in a row, unless you've got a great option sat there that you bail out of a player like this, because you probably have had to pick him as far as quarterbacks go as well, put a bit of capital in. So you've kind of got to stick with that. But James, what start sit have you got for us?
So my start sit this week comes in from Aero_H86 on Instagram. And it's very simple. It's a question that I know Matt has been in your mind for a couple of weeks now in our International Dynasty League. Yep. And that is around Ezekiel Elliott. Would you be looking to start him this week against the Steelers?
Oh, I've gone back and forth on this. I sort of noticed it last weekend, sort of saw the matchup coming up and been thinking about it for a while. I feel like it's kind of what I just said about bailing out on a player too soon. As much as it's a horrendous matchup against the Steelers, it's one of the roughest you could possibly have for your running backs. I feel like a player like Zeke, you just kind of can't. You can't not, unless you've got some great depth. Because you never know. He gets, there's so much upside there. The number of carries he gets, the fact he is getting all the goal line work. That it only takes him just to get one, and you put a touchdown on any of his recent performances, and it's enough. It's decent. It's not the Zeke numbers we're used to, but it's not to the point you're saying, I'm just going to bench him. So I think I'm going to ride with it for this week, just because it's such an elite talent that you can't not. But I'm very nervous doing it, and I'm kind of expecting if he does put up 5 or less, I won't even be shocked. Just be disappointed. Okay.
This is a question that for me revolves completely around your individual team. I mean, if you're stacked at running back and you've got Zeke, like you on the flip side, kind of, you don't want to be the guy who jumps too soon and stuff. You also don't want to be the guy who sits and worries too much about the big names. Like, don't be afraid to pivot away from him just because it's Zeke. The Zeke that we're getting this season is a Zeke on a team that's terrible, with an O-line that's a shadow of its former self, and also is just not going to be in those goal line situations as often. So you are kind of relying more on the big breakaway plays, which are stab in the darks. So I'd actually say, if you've got running backs and receivers, you've got a couple of running backs, a couple of receivers that you think are safer bets, I would actually say sit him against the Steelers. Now, obviously, if you don't have that depth at running back, and you may not, because you've probably drafted Zeke in the first round, and then maybe you've gone running back, receivers, and you've only got 2 good running backs, then obviously you've got to start Zeke. But if you've got the depth there, then I would sit Zeke against the Steelers, because this is going to be a blowout.
Yeah, I think I can see that happen as well. I think that's a great shout. And Zeke, at the end of the day, has put a lot of people in uncomfortable positions this season on fantasy, and you both have alluded to there.
He's been a bust.
It's probably going to happen again this game. But it's in a weird spot, because if you try to trade him, you're going to be trading him low, and it's probably too low for his value at the moment.
Can confirm it doesn't go well.
It doesn't go well.
Tried that. It's just not there.
You almost, unless you've got the depth, like Sam has said, you almost can't not start him, because it is just Zeke. And it's such a difficult situation to be in. So I don't envy any Zeke owners right now, because that is not nice. And
it's making my dynasty trading Zeke away in our dynasty. It's making that feel a little bit more comfortable for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because that was our trade, and I'm feeling alright with it still, because David Johnson and Mac, for this season, if you talk about the one, Mac being out, Johnson still being underscored. But I see what you mean. If he'd have had a lights out season, especially with Mac being injured, it'd be gutting. But it's a tough one. Everyone's disappointed in him.
Yeah.
But it's like any big player, at some point it's going to come good again, because just the talent's there. But yeah, it's not really the week you're looking for that. But it kind of does lead in to the start sit that I'm bringing to the table. Well, this one's a bit close to home because this one comes in from me.
Oh.
And it's about the running back position in my dynasty team. I've got 4 names that I'm floating around, and Zeke is one of them. But I think I've alluded to it there. I think I'm keeping him in just because it's Zeke. But the other 3 guys that I'm really debating between, and I'm going to be looking to start 2 of them. So one in the RB2 spot, one in the flex, and that is Edmonds, Ronald Jones, and Fournette. Those are the 3 I'm debating between. I've also got Lev Bell on the roster, but don't want to go near that personally. If that's another one either of you 2 have got some kind of attachment to or want to throw in. But the main guys, Edmonds, Jones, Fournette. Sam, who's leading that for you?
Right, this is a horrible situation to be in. So I think you're definitely starting Edmonds because he looks like he's probably going to get the bigger workload in that Arizona backfield, especially if Kenyon Drake's coming back and he's not quite healthy. And Edmonds has looked good in that position, so I'm more comfortable starting Edmonds. When it comes to Jones and Fournette, it's the last thing I'd want to do is start both of these guys and not have Edmonds, because not only are you then stacking players from the same team, so if the Bucks get blown out, you've got 2 positions, but it's from the same position as well. So like, only one of these guys, chances are, will have a good fantasy week. Now they'll both get work, but chances are only one of them will get the goal line carries and get the touchdowns, and that is, it's a flip. I mean, Jones figures to probably be the starting running back, but dependent on how game script, and if Jones makes a single mistake, I know, Matt, you harp on about this all the time. If Jones makes a mistake early on in the game, then you're going to wish you'd started Fournette.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going to say start Jones, because you be positive and you hope, because if Jones starts and doesn't make a mistake, then he's got the better chance to put up the points. But the entire time you're praying Jones doesn't make a mistake, because otherwise Fournette gets the lion's share. And Fournette maybe gets more work between the 20s as and when the Bucks take a lead.
Yeah, the way I see it, I 100% agree with Edmonds. Be starting him for all the points you just mentioned. I'm probably a bit more favourable to Fournette in this matchup. I think early in the season Jones had his opportunity, but then since Fournette went out with that injury and came back, Fournette has actually had more attempts and more yards than Jones. So for that reason, I think this is now Fournette's time to try do his magic and perform well. But there is that cloud that looms over, as you said there, Sam, with the fact that Arians can just pull him after one mistake.
They're just going to ride the hot hand.
Exactly, yeah. But at the moment, I think it is with Fournette. But that could easily switch mid-game. But for now, I think I have to back Fournette just on that attempts basis.
In other words, Matt, between the 2 of us, we don't know.
Yeah, so you've left me with a lovely little coin flip. I tried to sneak in some extra help for myself. It's backfired.
Well,
let's just move on. That'll come down to, I think, literally flipping a coin Sunday morning. See what happens. Who knows?
Sometimes that's what it comes down to. Sometimes that is what it comes down to, Matt, I think. Yeah, let's move on to the sleeper part of this episode, and that is the Listener League. What happened last week out for us, Matt?
So maybe not a shock at this point, but unfortunately it's another loss for the boys. We had a bit of a bye week nightmare in terms of setting the lineup. A lot of adjustment before the week. And just a few of the guys we had to bring in did not live up to it. We had Jared Goff, I think his projected was 18. He would have scored 18. He had 2 picks and 2 fumbles. Yeah. He had -8 points on what he got, so he ended up with a total of 10. That did not help us, considering we lost by a margin of 10 points.
Yeah.
Ended up with 97.3 on the week, and our opponent 107.26. So, yeah, 10 points in it. It's a rough loss for us to run through it. Bernard, good week. He seems that if Mixon's out, Bernard you can feel comfortable with. Be interesting to see how that usage gets split, especially in like the passing game once Mixon's back in. Lev Bell, no revenge game, 4 points. There's nothing there for the season unless Edwards-Helaire goes down.
He was the touchdown upside guy. I think that we were in the same way that Greg Ward was a touchdown. We were hoping these guys were going to get touchdowns, and they just didn't.
Yeah. Greg Ward, as just mentioned there, 2.7 points. When we were discussing it, it was him or Rager. We're like, who's going to have the upside? went with the guy that isn't the rookie that seemed to have been a bit of a guy for Wentz at points. Touchdown went Brager's way. It's just how it happens in fantasy sometimes. Corey Davis, great performance. 8-10 receptions, 128 yards and a touchdown. It seems whenever he's out there, and now he's back from COVID, he's getting work in this offense, even with AJ Brown still back. So I think a guy maybe we managed to pick up last week that will be hanging around our team a bit.
Yep.
Hayden Hurst, what's becoming a relatively standard line for him. 5 of 7 for 54 yards, 7.9 points. That's pretty much his standard with maybe a touchdown on top some weeks. So nothing to really complain about. Same with Montgomery, 11.5 points. You're looking for that 10 marker with him with a touchdown upside. Yep. So nothing to say there. Fournette, we said it just now, he got some of the work when Jones got pulled for that fumble. 8.6 from our last flex spot. It's not ideal with no touchdown, but it could have been much worse. Maybe one of the bigger disappointments for me on the week, the kicker, Blankenship.
Yeah.
3 of 5 extra points. 1 point for us. It's not what you want, I think, because obviously it's the way it's scored on Sleeper. 1 point when you make an extra point, -1 when you miss one.
Yeah.
So, cancel it out, not ideal. And then the Bucks didn't really get as much going, no touchdown. Allowed 23 points, which I think a lot more than anyone was expecting. But 7 points for a defense.
It's standard, and you should be happy with that. I think where we really lost this matchup at the end of the day, I don't think was necessarily even through any of our bad moves. I think through our moves last week, we put ourselves in a decent spot to win. The Eagles' defense just ruined it for us. 22 points, 22 points for a defense scoring on the week. I mean, 10 points on a week is a good scoring week for a defense. To put up 22 is unheard of. If they have just an okay week at anywhere between 7 and 10, we win the matchup. So, I mean, I'm not going to turn around and kind of say that we did ourselves a disservice with any of our moves last week. I think we just got one of those fantasy weeks. Someone on the other team just had a outrageous performance.
And look at it as well, 22 was the highest scoring player on their team last week. So it's one of those things that it happens.
And I think there was probably no one predicting the Eagles' defense to come out quite like that.
No.
You'd think against the Cowboys and the way that offense is moving, they're going to have an alright week, but not that. But it's how it works sometimes in fantasy. So bringing it on to this week. First thing we've got to tackle, Goff, is our bye week. He's been our kind of locked-in starter for a while now, which is panning out interestingly. It's always a fun one to see what he does on the week. So we had a bit of a discussion about this. We looked at what we had available to us in this league. The big name options and sort of ones you're considering. Cam Newton against the Jets. Any quarterback against the Jets you've got to consider, especially one with the rushing upside. Daniel Jones against Washington football team. I know Sam is a big Jones guy.
I like the rushing baseline.
A little bit of pressure there.
Yeah.
Until the turf wants to grab it. Drew Lock, another name, and Kirk Cousins. They were sort of the 4 we're looking at. Talk us through that, guys. What was maybe some pros and cons of these guys, and we ended up going Drew Lock. Let's talk through that a little bit.
Well, I think realistically, Cam Newton is the one that I think you want to be able to pick up Cam Newton, but also you can't at this point. I mean, he's thrown 3 touchdowns all season. He's not having a good year. That Patriots offense can't get really on a page, so I think he's out there. As we said, Daniel Jones. I really like Daniel Jones. I think he's got the chance to be great, but I mean, as you mentioned, Matt, he fumbles the ball, which is just a nightmare for fantasy. And then it's between Kirk Cousins and Drew Lock, and I think we're just kind of a bit hopeful that Drew Lock's got a bit more of the upside and the big boom kind of play in him.
Yeah, and the thing with Kirk Cousins this week as well is that he goes up against Detroit, and it's just been announced that obviously Matt Stafford is going to be out for the Lions, which I think may help Minnesota gain a big lead. So it'll be sort of the game script will be more favoursome towards Dalvin Cook in that game, which makes you a bit concerned about playing Kirk Cousins this week on that basis.
Yeah, and I think Drew Lock, we said it there, one of the points with Newton is it's against the Jets, which is you're going to consider anyone. Drew Lock's against the Falcons. Falcons statistically are giving up more points to quarterbacks on the year, which is saying something. So we're looking to pick up Drew Lock on the waivers. We've got that one. We'll find out in the morning after recording this if we've got him. I think if not, the pivot is then going to be a bit of a coin flip between the lads, between Jones and Cousins. So moving through the rest of the lineup, Robinson back from a bye. He's straight in against his Texans team. I think there's some definite upside there. David Montgomery, we're looking for that consistent 10 points. Again, got him set in our RB2 spot. Corey Davis keeping his spot against the Bears could be an interesting matchup, but when he's been out there this year, he's looked good, so hoping that keeps rolling. Brandon Cooks against the Jags, just looking for that typical Cooks upside. He seems to be late in the games, end of the third quarter into the fourth, he just seems to get all his points on the board, so hope that keeps rolling. Hayden Hurst go up against Denver. He's our tight end for the year, hoping he just keeps the bit of consistency, starting to build, maybe snags a touchdown for us, gets us that upside. First flex spot, we've got Christian Kirk against the Dolphins. It's an interesting one with that wide receiver core they've got there. It's not these matchup. Dolphins defense looked good.
I think they're the
against the Rams.
Best scoring defense, so they've allowed the least points of all the defenses in the league against them this season, I believe. They're actually a really, really tough little defense. So it's not an easy matchup, but I still like Kirk. I think James's shrewd suggestion that we pick him up a couple of weeks ago might come really good for us.
Yeah, looking for that. I think that's maybe the biggest touchdown upside in our team this week, because I think it was obviously by last week, the week before, 2 touchdowns and about 17 yards or something. But that's sufficient.
Yeah.
We'll take that. Then we're going with Fournette as our last flex spot against the Saints. We've talked a lot about this earlier. We're just going to have to see. I mean, I was about to say hopefully Jones does something that gets pulled, but hopefully not, because I've got him in another league. So I don't know.
It's a headache. It's a headache.
It's going to be an interesting one to wake up to for us Tuesday morning, but that'll obviously be in the Monday night football game, Sunday night football, sorry. Then, keeping it the same at kicker and defense, Blankenship and the Bucks. Hopefully Blankenship gets back to what he was doing and the Bucks keep up that run of getting just under 10, maybe creeping over if they can snag a little defensive touchdown. How are we feeling with that lineup? I think
quite confident.
It's starting to be pretty settled in.
Quite confident. I think we seem to just keep getting beat by people that, I was about to say scoring more points. It's like, yes, Sam, that is how we're getting beat. But we seem to be getting beat week in and week out by one aspect of the other team just going mental, rather than getting beat by teams that are just much, much better put together than us. So, I'm confident this will come good. Obviously, we're at 2-6 now, so we really need to put a run together if we want to make the playoffs. But it's doable. I'm not down until we're out.
Yeah.
Only 2 wins off the playoffs. It is still possible, and that's all we need. We just need a chance.
Anything could happen. Any given Sunday, Sam. I love that. Love that. I just noticed as well we're now second for points against this season, so we're still having points just absolutely poured down on us. So that feeds into what you just said there as well, Sam. That our decisions aren't necessarily been bad. It's just been unlucky matchups, and the Eagles' defense going off, for example, last week is
that's fantasy, baby.
That never good when, as you're coming out of week 8, you've got more than 1,000 points scored on you. Yeah. That's never comfortable.
It's
when even the 100 at the start of it doesn't line up with the week. It's like, this is rough.
It's not pretty to look at, is it? But hey, that is fancy, baby. As Sam just said there, that is fancy, baby. But unless you boys have any other points to raise, that is all we've got time for today. So as ever, be sure to go over to YouTube and go like, comment and subscribe. Also turn on the notification bell. That will let you know when we have posted a video, an episode, a podcast, whatever you want to call it, and you don't want to miss out on that. And also be sure to head over to Twitter and Instagram. We're at the Brit Iron. Go give us a follow. Go drop us a comment on there. Go give us a like, a retweet, whatever you want to do. But go get involved with the conversation and join the community. But for now...
And get your start sits in on Tuesday.
And,
there'll be 2 posts out.
Almost forgot, but yeah, get your start sits in, because we really love the questions that you guys have been sending in the past couple of weeks. But for now, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.